So welcome everyone today to our webinar on homeowners across Ontario and what they need to know to be aware of door-to-door scams. So I'm so pleased today that we are joined by some experts from the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario today to host and to present today's webinar for us. Before we begin, would like to provide our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we gather on the traditional territory of a number of First Nations and acknowledge their stewardship of this land throughout the ages. We seek a new relationship with the original peoples of this land, one that is based in honor and deep respect. Just a few housekeeping rules or logistics as we go through today's webinar. We have everyone's microphones muted except for obviously our presenters. We do welcome you to post comments in the chat box during the session today. If when we're going through the presentation, you have a question for our speakers, please post that in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will do those questions at the end of the presentation. We are joined with our ASL interpreters today. You'll see them on the screen during the presentation. You have the option of which view you would like to see their speakers in. There's a little grid box at the top of the screen, usually in the right-hand corner. You can change that to whichever view that would suit your own needs to make the presentation of the ASL more visible for yourself. Just as a reminder, at the end of the session, we will ask for your feedback to help us with evaluation. There'll be a pop-up little link to a survey evaluation, which is about 5 to 10 questions. It only takes a couple minutes to complete. And then we will follow up with everyone with an email providing the survey link, but also the link to the recording of the webinar on our website. And that recording will be posted within 1 to 2 days after the session, and being a long weekend, it will probably be on Monday, unless I have a chance to get to it. But as well as all the links that will be shared during the webinar today as well. And just a reminder that our forums are a public venue, so we do appreciate people may have personal circumstances they may want to talk about. We do encourage you to reach out to our organization if you'd like to talk to about a situation. But if we can keep questions more general sense, as I say, there's public forums, so we do want to respect your privacy and confidentiality. And for those who haven't joined us, you can find more information about our organization on our website at EAPO.ca. Our organization is, our mission is to make sure seniors are free from abuse and feel safe and respected. And we are responsible for implementing Ontario's strategy to combat elder abuse. And we've been doing that since 2003. And we are funded under the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility to implement that strategy, which really focuses on 3 main pillars of work: public education and awareness. So some of the work that we're doing here today, educating people around prevention is such a key, important work that we do so we can eliminate abuse and protect, in this case, people's finances, and knowing what their rights are is a huge factor in preventing abuse. We do training for frontline staff, and we work with our community partners to improve access and referrals to support services that they may need if they're encountering abuse or their vulnerability to be at risk of harm. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. First, I'll introduce Chris. So Chris Zolas is the head of forensic analysis and investigations with FSRA and administers and enforces the statutes within the mortgage, pensions, credit union, and cases populaires and insurance sectors. Chris has led in a variety of positions, including with a federal regulator, provincial securities regulator, and within a corporate securities function of one of Canada's leading financial institutions. He's a chartered professional accountant, certified in financial forensics. He's also a designated chartered director, certified fraud examiner, and holds a master's in forensic accounting and business administration. He also has a postgraduate diploma in investigative and forensic accounting. So he has a wealth of information. So thank you and welcome, Chris. Along with Chris, we have Gina, and Gina is the director and mortgage broker conduct of Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. Gina is a seasoned policy leader with 15 years experience in strategic stakeholder management and the design and implementation of regulatory regimes of the financial services sector. Prior to joining FSRA, that was in July, she worked with the Ontario Ministry of Finance in the Financial Services Policy Division, where she supported legislative and regulatory policy work that led to the implementation of the Mortgage Brokers, Lenders, and Administrators Act. She's also served as the Ministry of Finance Policy Lead in 2013 and in 2018 and 19, and legislative reviews of the MBLAA. She directly supporting the minister's appointees of both reviews. Gina supported also the development of the financial services regulatory policy relating to credit unions and non-auto insurance. And lastly, but not least, we also have Stuart Wilkinson. And Stuart is the Chief Consumer Officer for FSRA. And he has spent over a decade working in public policy with a focus on financial services regulation in Ontario. In his role, he's responsible for leading FSRA's work, which is responsible for amplifying the voice of consumers inside and outside of FSRA, building and applying foundational frameworks and processes to guide the organization, and helping FSRA identify and address cross-cutting opportunities and problems. So before working here, he's worked in the P&C insurance industry and at the Ontario Ministry of Finance as well. So we have a wealth of expertise with us today to share their knowledge around the issue of mortgage scams, as many of people have heard, and these door-to-door scams, and the work and role that they are doing within the organization to help consumers such as yourselves that are joining us today. So I'm going to turn it over to our speakers who are going to start the presentation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Brianne. I'm, I think, tasked with speaking first. And I think, Rayanne, if you can bear with me on the technical side of things, I'm going to get our slides up ready to show. And then Chris and Gina, when they come up, can just tell me when to advance the slides, and we'll be in great shape.
Perfect.
I'm going to talk about what FSRA is. We call it FSRA. We're the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. And then leave it to Chris and Gina, who, as you said, are some of the leading experts in Canada on these topics, to talk about the meat of what we're here to learn about today, door-to-door scams and how consumers can avoid them. So I'm just getting my screen ready, and I'm sorry for the delay while I figure this out on the fly. I apologize for that. Rayanne, can you walk me through this? I'm sorry, everybody, but
Sorry, just click the share screen.
it's the green one. Okay. Great. So we should be on our way now. Can everybody see that? Rayanne, am I okay?
You are.
All righty. So I'm big on repetition, and the three key messages that you see on this slide, we're going to repeat them a few times in the deck. You're going to see them again and again, because we think these are the three most important takeaways for everybody from this presentation. First and foremost, FSRA promotes financial safety, fairness, and choice for Ontario consumers. Second, be cautious if you are approached by door-to-door salespeople offering home improvements. And third, if a mortgage broker or other FSRA licensee is harming you or other consumers, please contact us about it through our complaints or whistleblower process. And I promise that's the last time I'm just going to read from a slide. So like I said, I'm going to talk about FSRA, our organization, so you have some context on what we're all about and why we're here today. And then I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to talk more about door-to-door scams and tips for consumers to protect themselves. And then he'll throw it over to Gina, who's going to go more into detail on our role in the mortgage broker sector and things that we're doing to prevent fraud in the sector. So first things first, what's a FSRA? Rayanne, I'd love to get a poll of the audience to see, before registering for this webinar, who knew that FSRA existed? We're always interested in whether or not people have a awareness of FSRA as a regulator. I'm not going to answer the poll because I'm biased, but I'm looking forward to seeing the responses from everybody. It's a question I also ask of people when they join FSRA as employees, and often the answer is no. They did not know FSRA existed before they applied for a job at FSRA.
So I'm just going to, and we got almost everybody participating.
Thank you, everybody. So that is a really high yes rate. That's very interesting and great to see, in my opinion. So it was 30-70, 30% of the audience had heard of FSRA before they registered for this webinar. 70% had not. This is a slide from consumer survey research that FSRA did in 2022. And it shows out of a general population, we surveyed about 4,000 Ontarians. And we heard back that between 2 to 5% of those Ontarians could name FSRA as the regulator of a specific sector that we in fact regulate. And there are a lot of colorful bars in the chart as well. And those bars generally show that even if you're not trying to name FSRA, if you're just saying you're confident that there is a regulator in these different sectors, most Ontarians in most of the sectors that we regulate either don't know or don't think that there's a regulator in the space. And it's very important, therefore, for us to get out and do presentations like the one that we're doing today to hopefully not just give you some tips and tricks on how to protect yourself from scams, but also how help you understand the role that we play in protecting Ontarians more generally in financial services. So FSRA, Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. We're a financial services regulator in Ontario, and we regulate a number of different financial services. These are, I think we've got 9 icons up on the screen. I like to boil things down even further and think about it as a big 4. We regulate insurance, credit unions, pensions, and mortgage brokering. I think all those sectors are really important to Ontarians in both their day-to-day lives and at critical times in their life, like thinking about retirement or recovering from an unexpected loss and needing to rely on insurance. And FSRA is here in all of these sectors to play a different role, but the consistent through line is that we're here to protect consumers. Fair treatment of consumers is at the heart of everything that we do. And our mandate given to us by government, it can vary a little bit by sector. For example, in the pension sector, we have a slightly different mandate than in the credit union sector. But our DNA as an organization is really focused on these 6 things on the screen right now, which apply regardless of the sector that we're operating in, and really force us to put the consumer at the center of our decision making and always be about what's best for the consumer, what protects the rights and interests of the consumer most effectively. I'm here from FSRA's consumer office. FSRA is a big organization with lots of different areas and experts in the different sectors that we regulate. And you're going to hear from 2 of those experts later on. The consumer office is here to fulfill a couple of different functions, but the one I'm going to really quickly focus on is our amplify the voice of the consumer function. And I've thrown my email address on this slide as well. And I'm very happy for anybody who has more questions or wants to drill down further on FSRA or the consumer office in particular to write me an email, and I'm happy to chat further. My last slide is just explaining what I mean by amplifying the voice of the consumer. So FSRA is a consumer protection regulator. We're here to protect the public interest. And you would think that it would be pretty straightforward that regulators that are here to protect consumers would listen to consumers. But regulators have lots of things to do, lots of priorities, lots of activities they have to undertake to help consumers. And sometimes the idea of actually listening to consumers and having a finger on the pulse of consumer experiences in the sectors that we regulate can kind of fall to the side because of those other core priorities. So our consumer office was created in part to resolve that problem by focusing in on the voice of the consumer. And we do that through a number of measures, research. You saw some consumer survey research that we did earlier in the slides, outreach and engagement, things like this, reaching out to people in the community to meet them where they are and talk about FSRA and issues that matter to them in the different sectors that we regulate. We have a consumer advisory panel that gives us advice from a consumer perspective, and we're also running a grant funding program to try and build up programs for financial consumer education and research related to the sectors FSRA regulates. So that's it for me. It's a whirlwind tour, and I'm going to turn things over to Chris to talk about mortgage scams, and I'll be here at the end for the Q&A portion if anybody wants to ask about FSRA generally. Over to you, Chris, and tell me when you want to move slides forward.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Thanks, Ryan, and thank you, everyone, for having us. Pleased to be here to join you all. As Stuart indicated, I'm here to highlight mortgage scams. As he noted, FSRA is here to promote financial safety, fairness, and choice for Ontario consumers. Part of that is ensuring a level playing field and ensuring consumers are secure when they're dealing with mortgage brokers or agents. You may have heard Ryan referred to MBLA. We often refer to that as EMBLA. And that's what Gina has been heavily involved with in her current role and previously at the Ministry of Finance. So that's an act or statute that we administer for the most part. And at times we got to enforce it because some people fall offside. So we want to hear from you if you are harmed by a FSRA licensee, or there's someone purporting to be a licensee, as in a mortgage broker or agent. Next slide, please, Stuart. So I'm going to be discussing door-to-door scams. It's somewhat of a complex scheme that hopefully none of you will have to encounter, and will provide you some tips on how to avoid this. But in any event, I just want to bring awareness to the door-to-door scams and how they unfold. They don't necessarily involve FSRA licensees. this scheme involves a lot of people, and it crosses legislative boundaries. So different acts, different organizations. So it's not just FSRA. That also complicates things, whether it's for police or ourselves, because a lot of mortgages will involve a lawyer. So the Law Society oversees lawyers. We oversee mortgage brokers and agents, so we have that jurisdiction. If it's criminal, the police get involved. So we do our best to work with our law enforcement and regulatory partners to try and share information as much as we can. So there's a number of steps involved. Door to door, you'll see NOSIs, which I'll explain, which are notices of security interests, and then small mini mortgages, and then how it gets transferred to a private lender, and then ultimately a larger mortgage that is effectively unserviceable when the scheme is applied. Next slide, please. So this all starts with a visit from a neighborhood fellow coming to your door, trying to sell you something, whether it's an HVAC product, a furnace, appliance, even doorbells that have service contracts. So what they'll do, they'll say, you don't have to pay anything. That sounds great. And they might induce you to sign a few documents. You're thinking it's a great deal, but before you know it, it may have impacted the house you're living in. Next slide, please. So what happens is once they sell you the product for what they say is you don't have to pay anything, they will in turn put a NOSI on the property. Again, a NOSI is a notice of security interest. It's registered against title on your property. So typically, for a mortgage, everyone, well, a lot of people get involved in mortgages and they just know of them as draining their bank accounts. What happens here is when a mortgage gets applied, it goes on title, and similarly, a NOSI will go on title. This happens unilaterally after you've signed some documents. The homeowner has no idea that a NOSI's been applied to their title. The provincial government has referred to this as a virtual home invasion, and they are taking steps to eliminate NOSI's, but it hasn't happened yet. So hopefully, you will not have to deal with this in the future, but we're just bringing awareness. And it's difficult for one to distinguish from legitimate NOSI's from improper, fraudulent, or criminal use of NOSI's. So for that purpose, the provincial government's looking to do away with this. This is, I can say that some of the police services have been heavily involved in bringing this matter forward and highlighting the impact on consumers in the vulnerable population. Next slide, please. So once there are a number of NOSI's on the property, someone may come back and propose that a small mortgage could replace that. However, with that small mortgage, it's usually with an extraordinary interest rate. It's not something you'd see at the bank. And along with that interest rate, there's extraordinary costs of borrowing that initially the homeowner isn't aware. Along with that, the homeowner isn't likely to read everything that's presented to them. They trust whoever's providing the information to them, and occasionally will sign documents not knowing really what they're signing. Next slide, please. So once there's a smaller mortgage placed on the property, replacing the NOSI's, that private lender may become involved to eliminate the NOSI's and then replace it with a small mortgage. Again, the lender who's providing the financing for this private mortgage may not necessarily be aware that they're facilitating fraud or being involved in something nefarious that the door-to-door scammer initiated. Next slide, please. So then more nosies get registered on the property, again, unbeknownst to the homeowner. When the homeowner goes to sell a property, they have all these charges on their title. So unless it's cleared, and unless those charges are cleared, the homeowner is unaware and unable to remove those charges. It's taking a lot of work by advocates for the vulnerable to take these matters to court to get the matter resolved. So it's important that we try and prevent the application of nosies being placed on individuals' properties. A lot of the times, like I said, the mortgage is unserviceable, and there's foreclosure proceedings that results in the loss of the homeowner's house. You may have seen it on CBC and other articles in the paper. So in terms of prevention, I have my own mom that lives at home by herself, and I tell her, don't answer the door. Don't answer the door unless you're expecting someone. Even when I go to visit her, I call her on the phone and tell her I'm on the porch. Please open the door. Similarly, have a note on your door indicating that there's no interest in sales or soliciting. So if you don't have to confront the high pressure sales tactics, you don't have to deal with it. Have someone you trust that you can talk to at any time. So if you do answer the door, ensure that you don't sign anything at the door. Just take the information and close the door. If they continue to talk, don't hesitate to close the door. Just look after yourself. Along with the solicitation, try and protect your information, credit cards, signature, anything of that sort. So no one can possess what is so valuable to you, and that's your identity. So just make sure you protect all your personal information. Anytime you do talk to someone you don't know, make notes, date, time, who you're speaking with, what they told you. This is what makes these investigations so difficult. Memory is fallible for everybody. And the perpetrators are in it for the long game. So it may not affect you today, but it may affect you in 6 months. To try and think back to what happened on that date and time makes it very difficult. So make yourself notes and be aware of other schemes, such as predatory lending, where someone offers a loan at one rate and then all of a sudden they tell you it's unavailable and you have to go with another lender. Identity theft is important to recognize. Just be secure of all your belongings, ID, credit cards, information. That's what they prey on. And in terms of detection, so I'm here to try and prevent this, because investigating, as I mentioned, investigating this is very difficult. The police have a higher threshold beyond a reasonable doubt to secure a conviction. I have a balance of probabilities in the regulatory context. We encourage everyone to come in and report anything that they don't feel comfortable with. Even if you're okay with it, just report it if there's something untoward about it. And do not hesitate to contact police. A lot of police have victim services units that can help, and a lot of them also have vulnerable population officers there to assist. So don't hesitate to contact police and make a complaint to FSRA. We'll review it. And similarly, if police don't have jurisdiction, they can call us. We're happy to help, and we try and connect to the extent we can with our police and regulatory partners. And the bottom line is nothing is free. And if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. So just be wary of any good deals. We do have, if you are engaging with some of our licensees, we do have an enforcement and warnings page on our website, on FSRA's website. And it's right on the homepage. You just click on the enforcement warnings page, and you can punch in whoever you're dealing with to see if there's been any sanctions against them. Okay. And with that, I'll pass it along to Gina, and I guess we'll take questions at the end.
Thanks, Chris. That was a really helpful overview, in particular of those door-to-door scams. I think if I can get you to forward to the next slide, perfect. So Chris gave some really good information about a particular type of fraud that we've seen a lot of. As a consumer protection agency, one of our roles, and I think Stuart also emphasized this, is that we want to protect and educate consumers to help them protect themselves from being scammed or defrauded. The other aspect of mortgage fraud is there's a lot of different players in this type of fraud, and I think Chris emphasized that as well. We regulate mortgage brokers, but there's also other players that are regulated by other regulatory entities. Any complaint that comes through FSRA, especially if it involves other types of licensees that we don't regulate, we do collaborate with other law enforcement agencies on these types of things. So you can still complain to FSRA, and we'll ensure that you're talking to the right person depending on how they're regulated. But we do a lot in the mortgage broker sector. It's the area that I work in. My primary role is to work with the sector to make sure that they're supervising their brokers and agents appropriately. And part of that supervision is ensuring that they are living up to their requirements under our legislation to ensure that they're preventing fraud and that they're making sure that they are taking due steps to make sure that they're dealing with the appropriate people when they get identification, that they're verifying identification, to make sure that we're cutting down on potential mortgage fraud in the sector. There are two types of fraud, and generally what we've talked about today is fraud for profit, and that's a theme where people are deliberately falsifying information in order to profit from the mortgage transaction. The other type of fraud that exists out there is the fraud for shelter, and that's really when a borrower is seeking a mortgage and they wouldn't otherwise qualify for the mortgage, or they wouldn't qualify for a mortgage as large as they would like, and they fudge some of their documents. Both types of fraud are things that our legislation, which is called the Mortgage Brokerages, Lenders, and Administrators Act, I call it EMBLA. So when I say EMBLA, just remember it's the legislation that regulates mortgage brokers and agents that are dealing with the public. The EMBLA definitely has a lot of requirements that are meant to ensure that agents and brokers are not facilitating fraud. Both of these types of frauds, though, can be challenging to detect and prevent, given that you now have very modern, imaging software, things like that. Fraudsters are very, very sophisticated in the types of things that they try to do. So some of what Chris was saying, which are basic preventative measures of, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Making sure that you're looking at disclosures, those types of things. These are things that you can do to make sure that you're not being defrauded. Next slide, please. So these are some of the outcomes in our work with the sector that we are, the mortgage broker sector, that we're trying to support in fraud prevention and making sure that we are overseeing the mortgage broker sector to ensure that consumers and investors are being protected when they're dealing with a licensee. So our main goal is to ensure financial safety, fairness, and choice for Ontarians. One of the things that I'm very invested in and a great deal of my work focuses on is making sure that there are high standards within brokerages for protecting the rights and interests of consumers and borrowers and investors when they're dealing with a mortgage broker or agent, that they can trust that that person's brokerage is overseeing them, is making sure that they are not being deceptive or that they are otherwise conducting fraud. We also protect borrowers, lenders, investors by providing enhanced processes in identity verification, and hints and tips for the industry in how they can ensure that what they're receiving is appropriate identity, what they're receiving is proper mortgage documentation, and how they're managing their documents to ensure that no one's stealing people's identities by using their documents. Next slide, please.
And hi there, Gina. This is just the interpreter. If you wouldn't mind just a little bit slower so we can keep up, thank you.
Sure, sorry. I'm a fast talker. I apologize. So what's FSRA's direct role in detecting and preventing mortgage fraud? We have a very seminal piece of guidance that is out there for our industry that we consistently communicate with them about. We just recently actually did a webinar for the industry itself to make sure that they are fully aware of their requirements under the Act for the business processes that they have to do to make sure that they are not providing false or deceptive information when they're conducting mortgage business. It is a contravention for brokers or agents to knowingly or even unknowingly. So we have requirements that they should know to do certain things, to take certain steps, to make sure that the information they're receiving is legitimate, that it's not a fraudulent ID, for example, it's not a fraudulent pay stub. FSRA ensures that licensees understand what these reasonable steps are. We have a checklist that we have given them to look at when they're going through a mortgage transaction. We've also clarified for the brokerage itself what kind of business conduct requirements exist for them to ensure that their agents and brokers are not facilitating fraud. These requirements apply to all licensees under the MBLAA, and that's mortgage agents, both levels, agent level 1, agent level 2, mortgage brokers, principal brokers, mortgage brokerages, and mortgage administrators. So anyone that you're dealing with that is licensed under the MBLAA, these requirements apply to them. Next slide, please. So FSRA aims to support mortgage brokerages in fostering compliance to regulatory requirements, including those that are related to detecting and preventing fraud. As I mentioned before, there's a number of supports in this sector that we give brokerages to make sure that they are complying with the requirements under the Act, to verify identities, et cetera, and to make sure that they are not knowingly or unknowingly facilitating fraud. The guidance that we have put forward has a number of benefits, and it provides tools that agents and brokers can use to identify and prevent fraud. And it helps the sector itself to promote public confidence in using a mortgage broker, because they know that each of these brokerages are required to oversee their agents and brokers, that they're required to make sure that each licensee does a certain level of due diligence when they're approaching a transaction. Next slide, please. So the big ticket item in our presentation, and I think one that both Stuart and Chris emphasized, is if you suspect that you are experiencing a potential fraud, that a mortgage agent, broker, or brokerage or administrator is trying to perpetrate fraud with your involvement, please do. We encourage you to complain through FSRA's complaint process. I believe that Rayanne's going to put the link in that I have here. It's in the deck, but she'll put the link in the chat. And that way you can communicate directly with FSRA, and we can guide you through making that complaint. If you're concerned that your identity and your complaint might be used against you somehow, we do have a whistleblower program, and Rayanne will also provide the link to that page on our website. And the whistleblower program can allow you to be able to complain about a licensee in a way that protects your identity. A whistleblower is someone who has non-public information related to misconduct. There's some requirements to being a whistleblower, but in general, if you meet the requirements, FSRA is able to keep your identity confidential. One of the means of also keeping your identity confidential, if you're very concerned, is you can make a complaint through a lawyer. And the lawyer then makes the complaint on your behalf, and your identity is kept confidential through this program. Next slide, please. So what do we do? I think this is the outcome. What do we do? And Chris is a big part of this. I know when things go to Chris, then he starts to take action. What do we do when we hear about misconduct? In the first sense, we do investigate every credible complaint that we receive. Complaints are really helpful to FSRA in helping to deter and detect misconduct in all of the sectors that we regulate. And this helps us to take action that takes those bad actors out of circulation. It also helps us address bigger issues where you see fraud happening by a number of people that are sort of themes, just like the one that Chris outlined on the door-to-door frauds. It helps us take a more systemic approach to preventing that type of fraud. As I said previously, when we receive a credible complaint, we do undertake a thorough and impartial review. And if we do find misconduct or contraventions to any of our acts while we're investigating a complaint, we have a number of tools that we can use to ensure that we address that misconduct. And that can include things like imposing limiting conditions on someone's license. We can suspend or revoke a license under certain circumstances. We can also levy an administrative monetary penalty to a licensee, or we can commence quasi-criminal proceedings under the Provincial Offences Act. So the severity of the misconduct really dictates the types of actions that we take, but we do have a lot of means of addressing misconduct in our sectors, and addressing the misconduct also helps to deter future misconduct in our sector. Next slide, please. And I think that's our last slide. So again, I can repeat our key messages that Stuart started with. Our intention is always to promote financial safety, fairness, and choice for Ontario consumers. As Chris noted in his presentation, be cautious if you are approached by door-to-door salespeople offering home improvements. Protect yourself using the particular notes that Chris gave you in terms of protecting yourself in a situation where you're talking to a salesperson. Likewise, if a mortgage broker or other FSRA licensee you feel harming you or attempting to commit fraud, please contact us about this through the complaints process I spoke about, or the whistleblower process that we also outlined through the link. And at this point, I think we can take questions, right, Stuart? I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds like a great plan. And I'm going to ask Rayanne if she wants to facilitate the Q&A.
For sure.
All right. Fantastic.
Excellent. So thank you all for your great presentation and overview of it seems very complex, scam that is happening, and it's hard to kind of track. So we have a lot of good questions in regards to the nosy, the scam. So I'll start with the first one. Is there a way to find out if a nosy has or has been placed on your house? And if so, how and who can give you this information?
So I can answer that. Terranet has a product. Terranet is the one that administers land titles for the province of Ontario. They're under contract, so they're a private organization under contract. You can register on there to get a title search done for your own property, or you can go to a lawyer and have it done.
And the name of that was Terranet?
Oh, Terranet.
Terranet.
T-E-R-A-N-E-T.
Okay, great. Thank you. And there's a cost for that or not?
There is, yes.
Is it substantial? Or
Yeah, I think it's about $40 to get an abstract for your own property. Small investment for peace of mind, but I also appreciate it's a cost, right? So, and it's your own property.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't seem just, but yes.
Good to know. And does FSRA, FSRA work across provincial borders for fraudsters who function in one or more provinces, or even across borders in the United States?
So I can also answer that. Yes, we do share information with our provincial partners. So as soon as we come across information, we assess jurisdiction, who may have jurisdiction over the offenses, and proceed accordingly. It depends how we pursue it. So if it's regulatory or jurisdiction may be less than if we pursue it through quasi-criminally, where some of the tools might not have effect in the other provinces. But we
Thank you.
will work with the other regulators to ensure that something is done.
And now for the other provinces such as Quebec or Manitoba, is there a specific name for those agencies such as yours that people
Yes.
can find that information out?
Yeah, so it's AMF for Quebec. I don't know the long form. And then for the other one, sorry, what was the other province?
Manitoba.
Yeah, I think their regulators are split in terms of who administers insurance, who administers mortgage brokers. But if you contact FSRA, we can point you in the right direction
Great,
on who
thank
to
you.
contact.
There's another question about how do you do outreach to seniors directly or indirectly and inform them of your efforts in the fraud in the community? Well, I can say this is our one initiative that we're trying to do in terms of outreach to let people know, but I'm not sure if you're doing other work in this area. And I think when talking with Stuart, I know you've been trying to increase that outreach. So maybe I'll just turn it over to Stuart or others that might be able to respond.
I'll take a shot generally, and then Chris and Gina can add anything specific to mortgage scams. But in general, you're right, Rayanne. We're working on getting better at building outreach to Ontarians, and particularly vulnerable Ontarians, those that are at higher risk of financial mistreatment or harm. Last month, we did a webinar about a proposed approach to strengthening the protection of vulnerable consumers in Ontario in the sectors that we regulate. And that approach that we're proposing really focuses on two things. One is working with the entities that we regulate to build stronger practices in their business and align with them on the outcomes that we want to achieve for vulnerable consumers. And then the other side of it is going directly to consumers to engage them and empower them with the information that they need to make informed decisions. So I don't have, well, what I'll say is it's a work in progress for us. And this webinar is an example of the effort that FSRA is making to promote public confidence, education, and knowledge about our regulated sectors. And we're really thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with you all today. And thank you, Rayanne, for providing that opportunity. And we're going to be trying to do more things like this in the future as we increase our focus on protecting vulnerable consumers. Chris and Gina, do you have anything that you want to add on that one?
I'd like to say that our area, which is the supervision and conduct area in FSRA, I know that the woman that I report to does a lot of outreach to media organizations, particularly media organizations in other languages than English, because some of the fraud that we've been seeing are consumers that are transacting in another language other than English, that are signing contracts that are only in English, and they're having people interpret the contract and they're not getting the right interpretation. So we're trying to make communities like that, because that's another measure of vulnerability, trying to let communities like that know that they should have the appropriate advice when they're signing a contract, and make sure that they're aware that this type of fraud is happening.
And I will just add to compliment Gina's comments. I look at my mom, she doesn't surf the internet, so she's not going to be sitting on a webinar listening to us, right? She reads her hometown newspaper, and that's how she gets her information. So it's not a one size fits all for everybody. We're trying our best to touch as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also, you know, the messaging that we are learning here today, or we see there's been a lot of coverage on some of the investigative journalism of, I'm just going to say W5, I think, in Marketplace have done some work on the nosy just to bring public awareness to that. And as we bring this back to our parents or aging neighbors, just to let them know what's going on if someone comes to your door, things not to do. And it's funny, I was just at a session this morning and I'm talking to a gentleman, and he says, talking to his mom, and she said, yeah, a guy's coming over here to check my furnace. And he made a point of being there to when they arrived, and you know, kind of went along with this. I'm not sure if that's what this was going to happen, but you know, came down first thing, oh yeah, you need a new furnace. And then he's like, well, how do you know that, right? So anyway, you kick them out eventually, but having other allies to help and tell them someone's came to my door, or not to be ashamed of letting people know that you're not sure what's going on, to prevent any further harm that's going to happen. So communication, I think, is as a good part. And someone just said or asked a question, you know, as you had mentioned, Chris, not everybody has access to a computer. Do you have print materials that people can access around this?
Stuart, I'll defer to you.
Thank you very much. That's a great point. So something that we're doing, I mentioned grant funding earlier, and part of that work, we're in the process of evaluating grant proposals that we received, and we're looking for consumer education proposals that could involve reaching out to people through brochures or other print materials to engage and educate them. We don't typically create brochures or materials for particular consumer education campaigns. What we do is work with local community newspapers and place what we call map stories, or write stories that can go into community newspapers that help get the message out. So that's one of our print media tactics. But in general, we can always do better, and we're looking to partner with more folks to improve our reach in that area.
Great, thank you. So there was just another question about, are they eliminating nosy soon?
It was announced that it would be introduced in the spring. Like the provincial government was going to announce legislation in the spring. There were articles in the paper that if they didn't, there was a private members bill that was introduced to do the same thing. So I think with the work of the police, other regulators, partner regulators voicing their concerns about nosies, I think there's every intention to remove them, but they haven't been removed yet. And there was also indication that when they do remove them, they'll be applied retroactively, which is encouraging.
Great. And then there was just another question about, like, how many cases of fraud have you identified? And I don't know if that's just in general or just in terms of the nosy scams that somebody's asking in regards to that.
Well, I won't talk numbers, but I'll defer to our website on sanctions that we've taken to the FST, but it became apparent that it was an immediate concern for consumers and us.
Okay, so we'll just, if everyone goes to the site, they'll find more information around that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so again, into statistics, do you have statistics on the frequency of how many of these nosy scams are happening and how much money is being lost?
Well, I can suggest, well, from our website, the sanctions that have been handed down are in $100,000, but there's other investigations going on that I won't speak of, but just not at liberty to talk about that right now, unfortunately.
Okay, there was another question in regards to reverse mortgages. So we see a lot of these on commercials on TV about people applying for those. Is there just a question, are those considered a scam? So
Rayanne, no. Reverse mortgages are a legitimate mortgage product. The thing with reverse mortgages are that under the EMBLA, anyone applying for a reverse mortgage needs independent legal advice before they sign the contract. The independent legal advice requirement is to ensure that that individual gets advice that is separate from the person marketing the mortgage to them. Like any other financial product, it really matters whether that product is suitable for that particular individual's needs and circumstances. Mortgage brokers and agents, whenever they're promoting a mortgage to a consumer, they must ensure and take suitable steps to make sure that that product is suitable for that person, depending on their financial circumstances, depending on their future goals, etc. So it's not a scam. The thing that I would suggest is that someone thinking about a reverse mortgage should be very clear with the broker or agent that is offering it to them, what their needs are, what their future plans are, and assess whether or not it's the appropriate product for them to achieve the outcomes that they've identified.
Great, thank you, Gina.
And
Go ahead,
if I
Chris.
can just add, Gina referred to independent legal advice. That doesn't necessarily mean relying on the lawyer that they recommend. So again, talk to someone you trust and have them refer you to a lawyer, as opposed to someone that gets referred to you by who may have a vested interest in selling their product.
So someone just asking if you can maybe just do a quick, what is a reverse mortgage?
So in really simple terms, a reverse mortgage is a way that a homeowner can take equity out of their home in the form of a mortgage, and then that value upon either their selling of the home or their death, the amount of that mortgage goes to the title holder, which is the company that provides them with the reverse mortgage.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for posting some of the links in the chat boxes that I've in terms of some of that related to some of the questions today. So I do appreciate that. And I did post a couple other things around the frauds and scams book that is out as well. It's the Little Black Book is a very good user-friendly guide for consumers just to figure out what scams are out there and how to prevent them from happening. So someone just asked, can you lose your home from a reverse mortgage? In some cases, I'm not sure.
Well, it is a contract like any other. If you do sell the home, you must pay the mortgage back, or if you're forced to sell the home, the value goes to the person that arranged the mortgage for you, the holder of the title.
Great, thank you. So I want to thank all of you for your wealth of expertise that you've shared today. And I know there's going to be probably lots of questions that follow up from this webinar, and we'll post, I say all the key messages as well as all the links that we shared today with everyone, as well as the PowerPoint, because there was some requests about that. I think it's so important about trying to be on top of all of these unfortunate scams that are happening to individuals to all ages, but particularly for older adults who are sometimes taken in by these, the scammers out there. So I do appreciate your time to share that with us today. And hopefully we'll be able to do maybe another one in the future on the further work that you do, because you have different sections that you do in pensions and auto insurance. So there's a lot of work that you do under your umbrella, under FSRA. So perhaps we can do further education to our to those that we're trying to reach in our communities to prevent these situations from happening. I do want to bring people's attention that we are hosting additional webinar, keeping in the finance area, on April 4th on increasing digital and financial literacy with Connected Canadians. And we just did a webinar with them about a month ago, or a few weeks ago, I should say. So we're continuing that work with them to educate people around some practical knowledge that older adults might benefit from, and sort of understanding the digital literacy work. And then we're also doing some sessions on the rights of older adults. So we actually have a great lineup of individuals and experts that are talking around the human rights of older persons, because we're working towards a call for the UN Convention on the Rights of Older Persons. And so we have Adrienne Clarkson that's going to be joining us for that session. Really key stakeholders that you can see here that we've collaborated with. with the Global Alliance. I encourage you to go to our website, check that out, and register, because again, we're looking for that call of action. We need people to speak up, and I think it was Chris talking about having that voice, putting that forward. So we're really working towards that, getting people's engaged and knowing what their rights are, but also advocating for their rights, because we do not have a UN Convention on the Rights of Older Persons right now. And then we're hosting 2 webinars around building elder abuse networks, both French and English, that we will be hosting in April on the 16th and the 17th. Again, you can find information on our websites about that. And then coming up soon, people are planning for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. We will have more details soon, but you can register ahead of time. Last year, we had over 800 people that registered for that webinar. So I will have more information for our speakers, but you can register fairly soon for that webinar, or you can register now, but we'll have details soon. And lastly, just a reminder, please take a couple seconds to fill out that evaluation form. We do appreciate your input. If you want to contact our organization, this is my contact information. You can go to our website. We have a number of resources and information, things that you can download, and fact sheets. I see another lot of our community partners online today, and reach out to your local elder abuse networks that are available across Ontario, who also do a lot of education and outreach in their communities. So thank you all again for your presentations today. Thank you for coming today, for the participants, and to our ASL interpreters for joining us and making our programs accessible for people across the community. So thank you all, and have a nice long weekend. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.